welcome you to this. We want to welcome everyone to the first ever Seattle-King County NAACP Virtual Candidate Forum. I'm Christopher Sebastian Parker, Professor of Political Science at the University of Washington, and I will be your moderator for this evening. Tonight's forum is with the 4 candidates running for the 37th District State Representative positions 1 and 2. For position 1, we have Sharon Santos, the incumbent, and John Stafford. And for position 2, we have Kirsten Harris-Talley and Chukundi Salisbury. However, Ms. Harris-Talley will be joining us late due to a scheduling conflict. Tonight's event is a forum and not a debate. Each candidate can answer questions, but will not have the opportunity to respond to his or her opponent. We have some questions prepared around the general topic of civil rights, and we'll also accept questions from the audience. You can type your questions into the Q&A section. As discussed, we will have time limits on responses. Unless otherwise instructed, the candidates will have 2 minutes for a response and then a 1-minute follow-up once both candidates have had an opportunity to respond. A timekeeper will flash a yellow sign when 30 seconds are remaining in your allotted speaking period, and a red sign will appear when your time is up. You may finish your sentence when the red sign appears. Let's start by having each candidate take 3 minutes to introduce themselves and provide opening remarks. Prior to the start of the event, we confirmed the order of presentations, and let's just say I will start with we'll start with the incumbent from position 1, Sharon Santos.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, and to all of the organizers from Seattle-King County. I want to thank you for this opportunity to appear at this forum. My name is Sharon Tomiko Santos, and I am very, very proud to represent the 37th Legislative District, the most diverse legislative district in the state, racially, ethnically, religiously, and economically, where in the last census, more than 63% of us identified as non-white. Indeed, 27% of us were API, and 23% of us were Black or African American. And more than 1 in 4 persons were born in another country. I'm proud to represent this district because I am a product of this district, and the people and the communities that raised me, that instilled in me my values, that shaped my worldview, and that informed my priorities in life and in the legislature. I'm the daughter of a special education teacher who worked in the Seattle Public Schools and who, as a young girl, was incarcerated unjustly because of the way she looked and because of her ethnic background. I'm also a free and reduced price lunch kid who attended elementary, junior high, and high school in our district. And because of my free and reduced price lunch status, I qualified for a federal anti-poverty program that led me to the doors of a community action agency that was known as the Central Area Motivation Program. These and other formative experiences are the foundation of my passion for equity, opportunity, and justice. And I'm proud to have built a record on these issues, the foundation of these issues for the past 22 years in the legislature. And I'm especially gratified to see that these aims are finally being recognized by the broader public in the Black Lives Movement. Equity in education. As a lifelong advocate for equal opportunities in education, I believe that our system must be student-focused and success-centered. I led successful efforts to reform our disciplinary policies in the public schools and to fully fund public education. Opportunities for workers in small businesses. I have been a lead champion on issues regarding affirmative action and the need to repeal Initiative 200. But in the meantime, I haven't been sitting on my hands. I've worked to make sure that we provide opportunities and access to capital, especially for our small minority business enterprises that serve our communities and our neighborhoods. And finally, I have to say that growing up in the 37th Legislative District, I was raised to know that Black Lives Matter. And this grounds me as I help to shape the laws that we must all live under. I look forward to continuing to work with the NAACP and members of our African American community and other allies for justice as we bring to reality the promise of equity, opportunity, and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And now to her opponent in the position 1 seat, Mr. John Stafford.
All right, thank you. Good evening. My name is John Stafford. I'm a candidate for state representative in the 37th Legislative District, position 1. I'll start with my platform. I have 4 priorities. First, avoid austerity in the upcoming budget negotiations in Olympia. We face a pending $4.2 billion revenue shortfall over 3 years, and we cannot afford to deal with this by cutting social programs for our most vulnerable. Second, institute a new source of progressive taxation in Washington state. We have the most regressive tax structure in the entire country. Our poorest residents pay 18% of their income in state and local taxes, whereas our richest residents pay only 3%. This is exactly backwards. To deal with this, I support a capital gains tax. Third, address the demands for racial justice and in multiple ways. Yes, we need police restructuring, which I support. Yes, we need criminal justice reforms, which I also support. But we also need to address the underlying societal inequities that give rise to many of our challenges in the first place. So for example, in Seattle public schools, 83% of Black students are on free and reduced lunch programs, whereas the figure for white students is 9%. These types of underlying inequities need to be addressed. Fourth, we need to aggressively deal with the imminent threat of climate change. And here we need high impact, low cost programs. We need to declare a climate emergency in Washington state. We need to ban the purchase of new internal combustion engine vehicles by 2030. And we need to institute mandatory K-12 climate change curriculum in the public schools statewide. So that's an overview of my platform. I'll move on to my background. I'm highly involved in the community. I'm a 20-year resident of the 37th Legislative District. I reside on Beacon Hill. I'm on the executive board of the 37th District Democrats and have been for 5 years. I'm a multiple term PCO. I'm involved with 3 climate change organizations. I'm on the steering committee of the South Seattle Climate Action Network. I'm the treasurer of the Environment and Climate Caucus of the Washington State Democratic Party. And I'm a member of the 37th Legislative District Environment and Climate Caucus. I've also written over 40 articles on public policy for the South Seattle Emerald. I've had 2 careers. I'm currently a teacher. I teach social studies for Mercer Island High School. Prior to that, I worked for 15 years as a full-time substitute teacher for Seattle Public Schools. During that time, I worked in virtually every single one of the school district's 100 schools. And in my first career, I was a partner for a management consulting firm in Washington, D.C. for just over a decade. Thus, I have a broad background, which I believe will serve as a strong foundation from which to address the major glaring challenges of our time. It's good to be here at the forum tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Now we'll move on to the candidates for position 2. Since Kirsten Harris-Talley is not here yet, we will begin with Mr. Chukundi Salisbury. Mute, you're muted. Mr. Salisbury is, he will be with us. Mr. Salisbury is currently muted.
I do that every forum, man. Sorry, you guys. Start my time over. Okay, here we go. All right, here we go. Hey, my name is Chukundi Salisbury, and I'm running to be your 37th District State Representative here in position number 2. I'm running as a Democrat. A little bit about me: I'm married with 2 children, and I live in Rainier Valley, where I've resided for the last 23 years as a homeowner. You know, I grew up in the central area. I attended elementary, middle school, and high school here in Seattle, finishing at Garfield High School, home of the mighty Bulldogs. I have a degree in computer science from Elizabeth City State University at HBCU, located in North Carolina. You know, for my professional career, I've worked at for the city of Seattle in Parks and Recreation for the last 23 years, serving in several positions. And I'm currently a manager for the Environmental Sustainability Education and Engagement Unit. For you, and for us in this district, I want to work on police accountability, economic empowerment through youth employment and job training, tax reform, and stopping the march of gentrification and allowing our elders to age in place. I want to work on fully funded education, fighting homelessness with practical real-world solutions, and protecting our green spaces and tree canopy. You know, I've been a dedicated volunteer and servant leader here in the 37th District for over 30 years with organizations such as Southeast Youth and Family Services, Real Change, Mothers for Police Accountability, the YMCA, the Royal Esquire Club, and more. We need a bold agenda in this state. We need to make the government recognize that Black lives do matter. We need a Green New Deal for Washington. We need to fight for our right to stay here. We've heard a lot of politicians with great intentions that give us broken promises on these issues. We know that Black and brown people are consistently left behind, whether it's gentrification, evictions, and everything. We need an impact. We need our impact to meet our intent. So, you know, this year I'm running because I don't want to let typical candidates represent us in Olympia. We keep hearing the same things, and it's time for us to get true representation and drill that down and make sure that we have people with real lived experience in Olympia. And I'd like to be that candidate. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chukundi. So now we'll begin with the substantive questions that I've drafted. So we hope to get to hopefully 4 to 5 questions. And so, and each question is for each of the panelists, and you may, you know, answer in any order in which you choose to do so. So the first question is, what is your position on Black Lives Matter? And what, if anything, will you do to assist in achieving its goals? Whoever wants to answer.
I'm happy to start with this question. I'll make a couple of points. First, the Black Lives Matter protests, movement, organization needs to be seen as a just and very important social movement in our country. People, of course, are tired of watching police officers, almost invariably white, shoot unarmed Black individuals, oftentimes killing them, and then after that, watching grand juries or the so-called justice system let off the perpetrators. And we all know that for every one situation that we actually see, because it's been captured on a digital device, there are who knows how many of these types of incidents that we're not seeing. So this is very, very troubling, and it needs to be addressed. So I fully support the Black Lives Matter movement. The second point that I'll make is it is operating on multiple levels. So it's demanding police reform, which I support, criminal justice reform, but it's also demanding a reckoning with the nation's history of racism and of its tendency over and over again to reproduce racist structures. So after the Civil War, we have Reconstruction, but that's butchered. We then have Jim Crow laws. We have the age of mass incarceration. So it's this demand to address the racist nature of our history, the racist elements of it, is also very important. In order to assist Black Lives Matter, as I said before, I do support police restructuring. Perhaps I'll have a chance to go into detail on that later. I do support criminal justice reforms. But I think, as I said in my opening statement, it's also critical to get down deeper and deal with societal injustices that give rise to many of our problems. When we have 83% of our Black students in Seattle public schools on free reduced lunch programs and 9% of white students, we know we're going to have major issues of injustice, inequity that are going to ripple through society and create all sorts of problems for decades and decades until they're addressed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Sharon?
Thank you. Good, I'm not muted. As I said in my opening statement, you cannot be raised in the 37th Legislative District by our diverse communities and not fully embrace and understand deeply that Black lives do matter. And as my opponent did describe, it is multifaceted. It is first and foremost about Black lives, but it's also about Black dreams and Black opportunities. And for me, what that means is making sure that we have a public education system that supports the learning of each and every student, recognizing the assets that he brings to the table, the dreams and ambitions that she carries with her, and the assets from the community that they both bring together. It also means providing the kind of higher education opportunities and job training opportunities. So moving though from education to economic opportunities, it does mean giving more opportunities for Black folk and others who have been disenfranchised. But let's start first with Black folk, because they have had the history of slavery that they have never been able to have overcome with the assistance of government acknowledgement. That means repealing I-200. It means making sure that there is home ownership, that we get rid of redlining, not just as it was once upon a time, but as it exists now. Finally, it is about justice and it is about police reform and making sure that Black people are represented in the civilian oversight of our police officers.
Thank you very much. Chukundi, it's up to you.
All right. Well, yeah, Chris, first of all, it's Chukundi, and it means God is above. It's from the Igbo tribe of Nigeria, right? And so, yeah, so what Black Lives Matter means to me, first of all, my name is a Black Lives, and it does matter, all right? So, you know, what I would say off top is that, you know, Black Lives Matter, it's a great conceptual piece. And what, you know, it means to me, it's great that we've turned the page and we've really got people looking at this. But I truly believe that we have to, it's very good, it's difficult to legislate somebody's heart. And so in lieu of that, what we have to do in terms of Black Lives Matter is drill down to policies and procedures and laws. You know, like Sharon said, we need to overturn I-200, right? We need to look at the policies and procedures that impact Black lives, regardless of what the intent was on the other side of whatever harm that was, and break down those systematic barriers in the law that hold us back. And so it's more than just, and I think the other piece around Black Lives Matter is it's really more than just around the police killings of unarmed African Americans. It's really about our entire lives. It's about Black wealth. It's about education. It's about our healthcare. It's really about looking at the systematic barriers and institutional racism that impacts us on a daily basis. It's just that the you know, that it's a shame that, you know, the police killings are the most you know, the things that are most prevalent to us in when you look. However, it's across our society. And so that's what it means to me, is that we have to end the white silence across every industry and have them join us in changing the rules and the law. And that's what will allow us to really have a society where Black lives matter.
Hopefully I get this right this time. Thank you, Chukundi. Is that right?
Chukundi, like fun.
Chukundi.
Yeah, Chukundi. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
My bad, brother. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So the next question is a follow-up to that. And quite frankly, so what is your idea of police reform? And what role, if any, does defunding the police have to do with that? Anybody?
I'm willing to go again first, unless somebody else wants to. No? Okay. All right. So with respect to defunding the police, I'll make a couple of comments. First, it's important to assess what is exactly meant by that. I don't support totally abolishing a police department because I think that will exacerbate the problem and it will lead to things such as affluent communities purchasing their own security services and lead to a further concentration of crime in lower income areas. So I don't support that. And somewhat similarly, I don't support arbitrary numbers. So I don't support a 50% reduction of the police department, let's say. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but the point is it shouldn't be arbitrary. Instead, it should be driven by an analytic process. And perhaps the most promising tool to achieve that is the analysis of 911 calls, which is already being done. And we can determine of all the 911 calls that come in, what percent, how are these segmented, and which segments require a police response, which can be handled via a mental health response, a social worker response, perhaps a paramedic response. And in the process of doing this analytic work, we can determine that we don't need the same police force that we need now. It can be reduced, which I support. And the funding that used to go to policing can now go to social programs in lower income communities, minority communities, which I also support. So there's a lot of promise here, but I do think it needs to be driven analytically. With respect to the types of things that should be done, there's just a whole host of them, not enough to talk about now, but certain procedures should be banned, chokeholds, the use of tear gas and blast balls during protests, the ban of the transfer of federal military technology to local police forces should be abolished. Removing police officers from schools, more training, crisis intervention training, de-escalation training, bias training, etc. So there's a whole host of reforms that I find compelling and that should be instituted. But again, it should be driven by an analytic process, not just by sort of randomly chosen targets. Thank you.
Thank you. Chukundi, you want to give it a run?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to give it a run. So my position, quite frankly, has evolved on this. And one of the things that really came to me the other day around defunding or realignment or whatever you want to call it, right? But basically, I am in favor of seeing us take funds from the police department or our services and be able to realign those into community services and unarmed responses in community that do not require obviously SWAT team or security services. I do feel as though we will always need some type of security in our community, and because I'm in the streets. And I know it's people out with guns right now, and I used to own a nightclub. Somebody got shot in my nightclub, right? And so, we definitely need, some type of response. But I'm very excited around the community service officer program that we've brought back here in Seattle. I saw my good friend Mugitu out in front of the Safeway and Bank of America on Othello the other day. And for those that don't know, we've got this program where these guys are riding around. They do not have guns. They are community service officers. They're giving out their cards. They're saying, give me a call if you got a problem. And they're there to work on those type of issues without having to call a unarmed officer. So I'd like to see us work on more programs like that, where we can keep some of those resources within the city to keep those good union jobs and with those benefits, in those budget pockets. Obviously, I work for the city, so I know that once you get rid of a budget pocket, it is very difficult to bring it back. However, I do want to see resources go to Black-led, organizations or just community-led organizations. But what I'm really troubled by is wage equity. I do not want to see a bunch of money flow out the door just to go into stipends. I want to see real jobs in community organizations. All right.
All right. Thank you very much. Sharon, ball's in your court.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you probably won't hear a lot different from me. So I'm just going to clarify. I do support the notion of completely transforming our police department. And I think there's a difference between a law enforcement agency and a peacekeeping agency. And right now, our police agencies act more like law enforcement. And that's what we actually call them. What it means for me, though, when we talk about transformation is it's not just the reform of practice, such as banning certain types of activities or banning certain types of equipment and gear. It really is about deep training and requirements that refresh that training on a regular basis. De-escalation is one of the things that you heard about. Anti-racism is also part of that. But it also means making the incentive an incentive on the part of the peacekeeping officer. We all read, I think, the article that appeared in the Seattle Times about a week ago about the how difficult it is to decertify a police officer. We need to do better by that and change that law. I think my time is almost up, but let me also just say, more than analytics, we need to have community oversight of all aspects, including identifying what responses we're going to have, identifying the budget that we're going to put forward, and most of all, overseeing the incidents of police brutality, the questions around certain types of tactics, certainly over any homicide that involves a police officer shooting. So that's my position on reforming and transforming our civilian police officers.
Thank you, Sharon. In a similar vein, then we're going to move off of this topic. We've been on it for a sec. But in a similar vein, this is going to be the last question in this area. What is your stance on the new juvenile correction facility that's been recently constructed? Sharon, you want to start this one?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. You know, I think that when we have youth who are engaged in activities that heretofore have caused them to enter into our juvenile justice system, I think that that is actually a signal to all of us adults that we've not done right by that child. We have not educated that child. We have not given opportunities to that child. We have not given the right opportunities to develop strong relationships to that child. I would prefer that we see instances of, instead of building new youth detention facilities, that we take that kind of funding, which is an awful lot of money, and the resources that we currently devote to it in terms of salaries, and really buff up the community-led and community-based responses to, again, helping support the education needs of our students, to provide them with economic opportunities, to provide them with the one-on-one mentoring opportunities, and also making sure that we employed all of those who are currently employed in our juvenile jail in another way that is involved with youth, but that it lifts them up and lifts them up within community.
Thank you, Sharon. Chukundi. Chukundi, what do you think about, what's your position on the new juvenile justice facility?
Well, you know what, yeah, so the new youth jail, you know, I'm very conflicted like most people. You know, obviously the building, we shouldn't have built it in the first place, right? But I just think that when we talk about it, to be clear, the money is out the door. The millions, $100 million, the building has been built, right? The contracts have been signed, right? And so now it's about what do we do in that building, right? And it most certainly should be an asset to community, right? And I know when people say, you know, no new youth jail, there's kind of this thought that we can, in fact, take all of those, you know, whatever it was, you know, a couple, you know, whatever it was to build the building, and take it and put it into something else. Like the building, we could just make it disappear and have the money back. We can't have the money back. The building's been built, right? So that being said, I want to see community-based programs. I want to see the county be able to give rent-free space to community-based programs that have a proven track record of engaging families. Much like 100 Black Parents, one of the organizations that I founded, right? We'd love to have a space in there so we can engage families and be able to provide services such as tutoring and mentoring. So that's what I think should be happening in the new youth jail. And then, of course, we should repurpose the name. I heard what Dow Constantine had talked about with that, but, I talked to a lot of people that work at the jail, and they said that is disingenuous, that judges are decide who has to go to detention or not. The King County, they cannot say that off top. So, so I'm kind of concerned about that. And I want to make sure that we keep our eye on that. And we should be talking to judges at this point about making sure that we do diversion and we're not necessarily locking up our young people, but we're sending them to community-based programs, such as, community passageways with Dom Davis or something like that, and not into the jail itself. So yeah, that's how I feel about the new youth detention facility that we need to rename. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we'll go to John.
Okay, so I'll just deal with this, building off some of the comments that have been made already. We need to sort of view this situation from the perspective of stages. And the first stage, of course, is to make sure that our youth have all sorts of opportunities that are productive in other areas. So that involves K-12 education reform, for example. We certainly don't want to do things like link graduation to testing requirements, for example. We want to make sure that we have relevant curriculum to different constituent groups in our K-12 schools. I believe there's an enhanced role for the trades and apprenticeships to provide more options for students. So there's a whole variety of reforms that should happen within K-12 to make that experience more compelling, more just, more productive to a wider variety of students. Similarly, from a jobs perspective, we need to be doing everything we can as a society to help people enter into productive work, minimum wage increases tied to inflation. The state's work share program that has the state help employers maintain their employees during recessions is very productive. Ongoing community support for youth. So all of this gets to the notion of supporting youth so that we have fewer situations that need to be addressed through the criminal justice system. That leads to diversion. When we do have situations that need to be addressed, we should do everything we possibly can to utilize diversion courts where a juvenile can come in for a low-level drug crime, and rather than be incarcerated, be given sort of behavioral health support, mental health support, counseling to keep them out of the justice system. And there's multiple different diversion courts: family court, law-assisted diversion, law enforcement-assisted diversion, etc. So incarceration has to be the last the last resort and should be used very sparingly. So I'm opposed to a high capacity juvenile correction center. Ideally, we can move to the point where it can be closed down. I was pleased to see that the King County Jail on similar logics is going to be closed down. So we do need to move aggressively away from this incarceration model and more to a productive engagement model that includes diversion. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'd like to happily announce the arrival of Kirsten Harris-Talley. So welcome. And so if you don't mind, so you've missed out on a few questions. So do you mind just jumping right into the fire here with this next question?
Happy to, and I appreciate your patience. As an ED, sometimes these things come up, but so glad to join you all, and thank you again for having this forum for our neighbors. Deep appreciation.
Thank you. Okay, so Kirsten, so here's the next question. So we're going to move away. You missed the whole criminal justice BLM whole thing right there. So we're going to move in another direction right now. And that direction begins with, this is a pretty good one. What, if anything, can you do or would you do to ameliorate the impact of COVID-19 on the Black community? That's for you, Kirsten.
Wonderful. Thank you for that question. And, you know, the hit was pretty immediate for our neighbors, particularly here in the 37th. We immediately had on our campaign as a community campaign, moving into what mutual aid and response was going to look like. And quite frankly, I think we need to continue to follow the lead of community on this. What folks are seeing immediately is that we need support around job security and what it is for folks to have a guarantee of knowing that they're going to have a wage. So many of our neighbors were hit so immediately with either deep reductions in hours, furlough, or just losing their jobs fully. And so what it is at the scale of government to think about how can we bolster the economy to make sure good jobs are staying for our families is huge. Another big thing I have to say as a public school parent with a 4th grader and kindergartner, I think we now fully understand the gravity of how education as a system, how much it is bolstering our community and our economy. And so what it is to make sure we have deep investment to keeping our public schools public and making sure students and families have the wraparound care they need there, from food programs to mental health to in-school clinics and programs. All of us are going to need all of those supports to weather this storm. What it is to bolster a healthcare system that's responsive at the scale of what folks need, I think that consideration, it's only grown what our needs are. And so I wanted to continue to see extended funding. I would like to see any considerations around AppleCare and expansion there, and what it is to make sure more folks are supported. And I would be remiss if I did not talk about the fact that for all of these supports that we have for working families, our immigrant and refugee neighbors do not have access to those same systems. The restrictions on the federal level and the state level that keep them from accessing so many health and human services, we need to continue to put pressure on the governor to extend the $40 million that has been set up for a working immigrant and refugee fund to make sure that reaches the $100 million mark that community has continued to tell us that we need, so that our immigrant and refugee families in 37th and around Washington state know they're going to have support to weather this storm as well.
Thank you very much, Kirsten.
Thank
Let's go with Chukundi. Chukundi, what do you think about that? I mean, what do you think? What if anything would you do to help ameliorate the impact of COVID-19 on the residents or the Black community in the 37th?
You know, well, first of all, the first thing we need is the extend the moratorium on evictions. It's very important that we get the fear off of people so we can take a breath, because COVID knocked the wind out of all of us. And, you know, I have many neighbors that are concerned about that, with eviction moratoriums ending, especially in Skyway and other areas outside of the city of Seattle. So that's very important, a stopgap that we can work on right now. And, you know, then moving forward, it's about bringing additional resources. There's many resources at the state level that have not been allocated. You know, one of the things that I'd like to work on specifically in the Black community, because I live across the street from a couple of daycares, honestly, and these home-based daycares are not receiving any funds around PPE. They're already operating at 60%. 60 cents on the dollar of whatever fees they would be able to get in terms of, you know, subsidies that come into these home-based daycares. And so we really need to set that up, because childcare is the foundation. It allows people to go to work. It allows people to get out the home. It allows people to be able to move forward. And if we can't have fully funded childcare and be able to support our childcare institutions and businesses in the community, then we're really going to fall behind. So there's most certainly a lot of things that we need to do around COVID, but I'm going to say that, you know, one is the rent subsidies and extending the moratorium on eviction, and then supporting and more resources to our childcare providers.
Thank you. John.
All right, so I will divide my comments into 4 categories: economic programs, housing programs, public health programs, and K-12 programs. And I'll note before I start that in all these areas, of course, the Black community and other minority communities are being disproportionately impacted. I read today that the business failure rate amongst Black-owned businesses is over 40% as a function of COVID, and less than 20% for white-owned businesses. So moving on to specifics, I'll start with economic. It's imperative that companies are able to maintain their employees to the fullest extent possible. I mentioned the state's work share program, by which the state helps companies shoulder the burden of compensation for the employees to enable them to keep their jobs. That's critical. For people that do lose their jobs, we do need ongoing enhanced unemployment benefits, both from the state and federal level. We need job training programs. So that's the economic area. With respect to housing, I support rent relief for people in need, utility relief for people in need, an eviction moratorium, and also things like a renter's bill of rights. Keeping people in housing, of course, has two benefits. One is economic, but the other is it reduces the chance of them being exposed to the pathogen in the first place. So that's critical. Public health, as individuals return to their jobs, it's going to be lower income and minority workers that are placed back in harm's way most quickly. So it's critical that the appropriate workplace protections are in place and observed. I do support, as I think it was, I don't know if it was Kirsten or Chukundi, but mentioned the Governor Inslee's $40 million fund for undocumented immigrants. That's good. I don't know if it's enough money, but it's the right direction. And finally, we need to talk about K-12. A lot of lower income students are losing access to distance learning. So I think we need to move in the direction of making the internet a public utility, and maintain ongoing free and reduced lunch programs. And as Chukundi said, subsidized daycare is critical for families of lower income families where their kids are now going to be at home. They're going to need daycare services at a higher concentration level. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Sharon.
Thank you so much. And I hope I heard your question correctly, because I'm going to, while I don't disagree with the previous comments we've heard, I'm going to really focus my comments more on the impact of health care or COVID on health. And so one of the things I really want to focus in on is the disproportionate number of essential workers who are Black and brown. And so they are required to go into work. And as some of the other candidates have indicated, the question around the availability of PPE is quite spotty. But what we need to remember is that these essential workers are also facing another issue, which is that if they are essential workers, they are more than likely to be hourly wage workers, and their ability to access healthcare is challenged. We can help by expanding healthcare supports to essential workers. We can help by expanding access to Apple Healthcare, as I think Kirsten mentioned. We can help by investing more strongly in our community-based clinics like Odessa Brown. We can help by creating, and we have had legislation in this past year to create healthcare clinics in our schools. Those are some of the issues that we can help to support our communities in having healthcare access where they are. The other thing that we need to really grapple with is the disproportionate impact of COVID hits Black communities and other communities of color harder because of our pre-existing underlying conditions. That says that we need to do a much better job of community-based education, again, through our community clinics. The last thing I'm going to say, because I got the signal, is we can increase funding, especially for those nursing homes that care for our Black and brown elders. They suffer from a disproportionate budgetary challenge. And I've spent many, many years trying to create a bump in funding for places that serve the 37th District elders in nursing homes and assisted living. And my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay, now we're going to shift gears, more general sort of social policy. What, if anything, should the federal government do to provide an equitable quality public education, rather, for all children pre-K through grade 12? Chukundi, we'll start with you.
You said federal or state?
Federal.
Again, so one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about in this area is that, while McCleary was a great step forward in terms of, addressing inadequacies in education in our community, COVID-19 has most certainly revealed the gaps in that. And so, what I like to see at a state level is for us to be able to allow districts to have more autonomy around raising resources to address the communities that are most impacted, right? And that, right, to me, obviously, that means Black and brown students. We are continually left behind throughout this, and so I'd like to see resources, to encourage districts to have more specialized public school options, such as, how we have Indian Heritage High School. I'd like to bring back the African American Academy, but I'd like those institutions to be public schools. And so the state most certainly can encourage districts to be able to do that, by allowing more latitude when it comes to some of those things. The other piece is we really need to fund special education. That is very important. It's something that's completely falling off of the table at this time, and our special education and IEP students are falling behind and will continue to fall behind. And lastly, I want to see the state put more resources into programs like the like the R program at Seattle College. I've been working with Dr. Keisha Scarlett, Seattle Public Schools, to encourage more people to get into that program. People such as Craig Jackson from Franklin High School and other students that are in there, so we can recruit and retain more teachers of color in our school system.
Thank you, Chukundi. Let's move on now to John. So John, what's your take on?
Okay, so yeah, thank you for the question. The first thing that I'll point out, which I find that a lot of people aren't aware of fully, is that the federal government doesn't play a really large role in public school finance. It's about, say, 13, 14, 15% of total, and that includes all the various ways that they get involved, special ed funding, Title IX programs, et cetera. So they do some important things, but the overwhelming majority of the funding for our public schools is from state and local government. So that's the first point that needs to be made. Now, that being said, 15% is not insignificant, and it needs to be handled effectively. And the policies that guide that funding need to be effective, as does the rhetoric. And so let me just make a couple comments about that. I don't support the federal government getting involved in the support of voucher programs that fund basically private schools. I also don't support financial or rhetorical for charter schools. I believe they rest on a false narrative that an individual can look at a school that has low education outcomes and then call it a failing school, as opposed to what I believe is the correct narrative, which we as a society are failing the community where that school resides. Failing schools are invariably in lower socioeconomic areas, so the way to address that is not to have a society with ever-increasing levels of income inequality. It's to address those issues so our communities are less disparate in the opportunities that they can provide. So in any case, I don't support a charter school. I also don't support narratives that talk about choice, et cetera. So there's a lot of rhetoric that comes from the federal government that I'm also opposed to. And yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, so let me point something out. So that's a given that the federal government is not directly involved in education finance at the local level. So I just want to stipulate that. Like, I knew that, everybody else knows that. I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. All right, Sharon.
Thank you. I can't wait to answer this question. So for me, what's very important about recognizing what kind of role the federal government can and should play is to remember that the first act of Congress following the Civil Rights Act of 1964, their first major topical civil rights legislation was to enact the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. That was intended, we'll just say intended, to make sure that all states across the country recognize that there is an obligation to support free, quality public education for all students that is equal. Now, I'm not going to go into whether we agree that that was good or not, but that's the appropriate role of the federal government, is to say, this is the standard that we are seeking. Now, a lot has happened between 1965 and I'm going to say 2015, because that's an important point, and that is we did go through an era of what was known, of course, as No Child Left Behind. You heard somebody earlier reference the test, the high stakes test, where we can withhold a student's high school diploma because they have not passed the federally required test. And so while it's true that there's not a lot of federal dollars that have come trickling down to the states, there are a lot of federal strings that have come with those very few federal dollars. And those strings that are attached to the federal dollars actually end up costing the state millions of dollars more just to comply with. So the first thing I would say that the federal government can do to make sure that public education is excellent and appropriate to every child is to get out of the way. That's the first thing. Now, having said that, I am very proud of the role that I played working with the Educational Opportunity Gap Oversight and Accountability Committee, which I will hereafter refer to as EOG-OAC, where we have invited members of the community. We have representation from the Commission on African American Affairs, Asian Pacific American Affairs, and I'm being told my time is up. I'm sorry, I'll have to come back to that, I hope.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Yeah, I mean, I could say more about what you said about the Civil Rights Act, excuse me, yeah, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and how, yeah, I could say more about that and the role of federal government in education indirectly, but I'll stop. Kirsten, would you like to comment on this?
I just want to start by saying, I hope you have that forum. I hope we get to be part of that forum. That is a forum we need to have. The context of what that 45 years of policy from the federal level and how it shapes state policy is an important conversation, particularly for the Black community. I just want to say unequivocally, Davos being in charge of education at the federal level has only deepened the basis of inequity of what is being brought down. And to your point, the standard that is set at the federal level does set the standard for the state level, and in a local control state, that then leaves all the determination to our local school districts. And unequivocally, what we have seen is this choice school option and this rhetoric of what it is to give choice is actually undermining equal and equity-based access to education. It's wholly undermining everything that we have built since the civil rights movement to have equity in education. So I want to be very clear about that. And I say that because we as a state have a charter school system that is creating divides within our own communities of high standard and higher performing schools that are starting to get more and more shares of access to public dollars as semi-private institutions. And so that standard at the federal level does make a difference of how we think about how we infrastructure and fund our infrastructure in Washington state. No one is left behind more deeply than Black folks in Washington state. Every data point shows that. And also the standard and push at the federal level over the last 30 years to have more police presence in schools with incentivization at the federal level and to increase funding for those while they have actually decreased the percentage they used to give to states. It was not always 10 to 15%. We used to have more dollars coming from the federal level. We have not seen that in Greece in 3 decades. And so what that is to see those parts of education treated that way. And I also want to say we need to move from an equality standard to an equity standard to continue to invest the same amount for every child in a school when we know not every child has the same level of need, and not incentivize the level of investment that we need for true equity to bring those who've been put behind for too long to the place that they should be has to shift. And we're going to see a huge hit to that with COVID. Already with so much of our education infrastructure, one student equals this number of dollars is going to gut the infrastructure of funding for our schools in lots of communities. So we have to think about that in a new way if we're going to invest deeply in our Black communities and our places in the 37th district that have been left behind because of other intersecting issues.
Thank you, Kirsten. So we're going to shift gears once again. And so now what I would like to ask is, I have one big, really interesting question to tie everything up. Where is it? Okay, wait. Okay, so wait, I actually have it written here. I got sucked into the questions, the responses. Good. All right, so what's happening right now with COVID? So let's stick with COVID right now. So COVID is apparently, it threatens to, affect turnout. And so especially with communities of color that are hit so hard with COVID. So what, if anything, can we do, or can you do, if elected, to mitigate the impact of COVID on turnout? So we'll begin with Sharon.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I hope that everyone listening to this broadcast or rebroadcast is going to take it upon themselves the responsibility, their civic responsibility, to make sure that between now and Election Day, they are reminding everyone that our ballots are going to be dropping in about 2 weeks. We need to have everyone fill out their ballots early. We cannot have any excuses for why there is a delay in the certification of the election results. The second thing I would say is, while I think that there is a concern about our communities of color being limited in the exercise of our voting rights, it's a little bit less in Washington State because we already have all 100% mail-in voting. So now it's just a matter of making sure that people get their ballots, fill them out, and get them back to an appropriate polling location. Could be your nearest library, could be your community center, it could be a grocery store. Those of us who are younger and able can help make sure that elders in our neighborhoods are being able to get their ballots there. This is what gives me confidence, Chris. We have had, as a state, we have done a remarkable job of filling out the census questionnaire. We are really keeping pace with the last time we filled out the census questionnaire, and they didn't have, we didn't have COVID circumstances at that time. So it is about all of our communities gelling together around the necessity, the obligation, and the responsibility of helping to get every vote counted.
Thank you, Sharon. John.
All right, so I'll offer a couple comments on this. First, as was mentioned, Washington State is in a relatively good position here with postage paid all mail ballots. So we are in a sort of a relatively good position. So that's the first observation I'll make. But a second observation, which I know is very obvious, but it needs to be underscored, it's just how alarming, how concerning what's happening right now with respect to voting is in the United States. We've seen the overturning of part of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, of course, which required Southern states to demonstrate that they weren't discriminating against lower income and minority communities. That was relaxed under, in my opinion, very specious arguments. We still have states purging voter polls. We have states closing down areas where people can vote that are in minority communities. The post office's defunding issues, removing post office boxes. These things are horrifying because it gets at the sort of the heart of our democracy and the heart of each person having the same at least access to the ballot. And so these things should have died off long ago, but they're resurfacing in very, very troubling ways. So we should all be very concerned about that. Finally, I think it's important to support all methods of reform that increase voter turnout. So I support a whole range of things, pre-registration, same-day voter registration, automatic voter registration, etc. There's a whole range of things that can be done to increase turnout that we need to pursue. And then I'll close with the most obvious of obvious comments that, you know, at the presidential level, there probably never has been, so it seems to me, a more important election, or at least it's one of the top couple. So, you know, certainly everybody needs to get out and vote and make sure that we end this administration at one term. So, all right, thank you.
No, thanks, John. Yeah, I should have added some specificity to that. That was a more, you know, general question, because of course you're right. You know, we have mail-in ballots, and so yeah. So I should have been more specific about that. But thank you, Kirsten. Once again, this is a more general question vis-a-vis turnout and COVID.
Yes, and I want to note that while we're a mail-in state, we are also a state that it is not a coincidence that we saw 40% of our sorting machines disabled over a 2-week period at with the federal level. So I want to be clear, right? Everyone needs a voting plan. And if you can have a voting plan that's about a drop box instead of a mailbox, that will assure the access, early voting, and making sure it's in a drop box. We have to think in those ways, because that is a federal system that can continue to be disrupted and interrupted, and it is a tool that will be continued to be used. I do want to note that we had a comprehensive voting rights package 2 years ago that is adding more here. We have pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds, many of whom are now of voting age. Anything to encourage them to expand whatever other civic voice they use to also include voting as the way that they show up and take action in their community is huge. And making sure, again, that our elders have the care wrapped around them that whatever plan they have folks assisting them in carrying out that plan is also really necessary. One of the other pieces that I really want to say, these forums make a huge difference, and what it is to share and have the digital reach so folks go in as educated voters is huge. And the other piece there is I have helped co-host so many in-language or affinity sort of, you know, house parties, voting house parties. I've already seen a number of organizations that are doing that in the digital space. I know the NAACP has been part of those kind of efforts, APACE, others. It's a diverse district. And the folks who are so often marginalized, right, are elders, young people, and folks of color. So what it is for us to all band together to double down on that in digital space. Our campaign, right, we're all being COVID safe. We're not able to knock on doors and do the things we would usually do. So any tool at our disposal to still make sure, even though we're physically distant, you can still have a connection that's going to make the difference in someone making sure their voice is heard. And this piece around the census, double down on that too. At the same time you're making a voting plan, please make a census plan. It makes sure that every federal dollar our communities deserve gets here, and we need it now more than ever.
Thank you, Kirsten. Chukundi, is there anything that, I mean, it's kind of hard going last. You know,
well, actually, you know what? Honestly, Chris, there's a lot to add. First of all, you know, I founded an organization called Herb Vote in 2014, and I've worked extensively on this for the last 6 years. And so, you know, one of the things I would say right now, what I'm talking to community about is this is a perfect chance to reconnect with elders and go pick up that ballot. We have a lot of, although we are a 100% mail-in state, there are many people that cannot get to the mailbox and give it to the mailman. Right, and so this is a great opportunity for our homebound and elders to go by and pick up that ballot. I was on a conference call with Julie Wise today as part of the voter education project, where, you know, my organization was funded by King County Elections and the Seattle Foundations to help engage in our community around voting. And so it is not illegal to go pick up ballots. In fact, many communities are doing that for their homebound and elderly. And I would encourage everybody that's watching this to connect with somebody. Maybe it's that elderly neighbor that you haven't seen in a while. Maybe they haven't come out the house in a while. You can connect with them and make sure that they in fact have their ballot. And then I guess from a candidate point of view, you know, I would say that we really need to work back on the Senate bill from last year, 6228, which did not pass. But, you know, it really talked about making sure that all of our adjudicated folks coming home would have their right to vote restored automatically. Currently, it is not restored automatically. You have to go and re-register. And that's one of the things we've been specializing in with Herb Vote. But that education should come the day that you walk out of Monroe or the day that you walk out of any one of our facilities. You should get that right to vote back automatically. So, you know, there's a lot that we can do around registering people to vote and getting the vote out right now in this and moving forward. Thank you. That's my time.
Thank you. Okay, so we're moving. So what do we have? We have about roughly 25 minutes left until the event is over, but that's not counting the 2 minutes that each of you have to make your final summary statement. So we roughly have about, 25. Yeah, okay. So we're moving to the last 3 questions. Hopefully I can get to the last one. And I'm gonna try to, these are more general sort of 50,000 foot level questions, if you will. So the first question would be, what, in your opinion, is the single most important political issue right now? So I just, you know, got the economy, COVID, and police reform, around which, of course, you know, Black Lives Matter is wrapped. So I'll begin with John on this one.
Okay, I'm actually not going to choose one of the 3 that you put forth, although I agree that they're all essential. I will add parenthetically, this isn't my choice, but you know, it just goes without saying, this era of white nationalism and discrimination and bias just has to come to an end. So there's certainly nothing that even comes close to the importance of having the Trump era come to an end. But the issue that I will choose is climate change. And climate change is an existential threat, not according to me, but instead according to the 98% of the global climate change scientists, and it's an urgent threat that needs to be addressed. It's time sensitive, it has to happen now. And if one thinks about the upcoming state legislative session, one will quickly realize that there will be tremendous focus, as there should be, on dealing with COVID-19. There will be tremendous focus, as there should be, on economic recovery and on Black Lives Matters concerns, all of which is as it should be. And what that means is that climate change runs the risk of being put, I don't like this metaphor, but on the back burner, and that can't afford, we can't afford to let that happen. So what I'm proposing is a focus on high impact, low cost programs in the upcoming session, and I'll list 5. First, declaring a climate emergency in Washington State. Second, passing the Clean Fuels Program in Washington State. Third, passing the HEAL Act, which makes sure that climate legislation acknowledges the reality that climate change disproportionately impacts lower income communities and communities of color. Fourth, banning the purchase of new internal combustion engine vehicles by 2030. And fifth, the one that's very important to me, patterned off recent legislation in New Jersey that passed, is mandatory K-12 climate change education every year in all of the schools statewide. There can be nothing more important than having, you know, 1 point whatever it is million school children learning about this danger every year. So climate change needs to be front and center still at a time where it'll be tempting for it not to be. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Kirsten, again, I mean, that was a good point John made. If you don't have to pick one of any of the ones that that I came up with, frankly, kind of, yeah. Anyway, pick your own, if you will. The most important political issue to you right now.
For me, the heart of everything I'm doing right now is centered on the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm a proud abolitionist. I'm a Black queer woman who's raising 2 children. I would like to have a future where, unlike my elders and ancestors before me, where my children don't have to live in a condition where they don't know that their lives matter. It was a very sobering thing last week to give them information about Breonna Taylor's decision and what happened. As a Black woman, to literally hear that a wall had more rights than her and being killed in her own home while she was asleep in bed is a very sobering reality of where we are as a country and how much we have to heal and make amends for. And at the state level, quite frankly, just as we've seen at the local and county level, we're going to have substantive conversations about what divestment and investment looks like for our state. And quite frankly, if we were investing upfront in what folks need, we would not be in the circumstance we need where so many are fighting to keep police and government control over people. Because folks would have what they need to thrive. And right now, we are not investing in people, and particularly not in Black and Indigenous and other communities as deeply as we should. And it has hit us so hard here in the 37th specifically. For us, what that means is that we are going to have to look at the $2.4 billion Department of Corrections budget and decide if those dollars are all well spent there versus other parts of our budget. We're going to have to hold the line of what it is to make sure we're caring for folks who are incarcerated while we try desperately to get them out of prison. I think the Care Not Cages movement, we're going to have to double down on what it is to make sure that folks are freed when they can be, and what we build is containers for folks. So for me, what it is to really think of raising revenue so we can invest in folks and dismantling a police system that is putting so many of us behind is the critical issue of my lifetime, and something I hope I get to see solved in really big and bold ways in that lifetime.
Thank you, Kirsten. Sharon?
Yeah, thank you. You know, my entire adult life has been focused on making sure that civil rights is the cornerstone of every other action that the state takes. To me, it is the kind of specific example where, as a person of color and as somebody who represents communities of color, this state has been so long led by primarily white males. We've already known and experienced what it is to have our lives turned back on. That's been the case. So, you know, I think that, yes, there will be a lot of attention on a lot of other single issues, whether it's police reform, whether it's this, that, or the other thing, but civil rights as a core value has never received really the ongoing adequate attention that it requires in order for us to live sustainably in the state of Washington. It affects us politically, it affects us socially. We can see by the divisive rhetoric that the current occupant of the White House has given permission to hate groups to actually be emboldened to act in public in hateful, unlawful ways. So to me, civil rights has to be front and center. We have to make sure that civil rights is part of the way we look at delivering our education system. We talked a little bit about SROs before. You know what? SROs only in the last 2 years are now required to have basic training in what it means to be a law enforcement officer in an education system. They never had to know what the civil rights are of a student in a school building. We have to have the civil right to an economic opportunity for all. I know my flag just went up, but let me just finalize this by saying, ultimately, civil rights is about the right to live, and to live a life that we can sustain and that we can afford to prepare our children for future opportunities and not have to live through some of the challenges that we've experienced. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Sharon. Chukundi, yeah. So what do you think is the most important political problem right now?
You know, I wouldn't say, I would just say racism. You know, obviously it's along the same lines as Kirsten, where Black Lives Matter, but I just would expand that to systemic racism. And until we can really begin to address that, now is the time for us to take bold action and be able to really address these systemic issues that we are facing across the country, and most certainly in our particular district. And it's beyond police accountability, and it's beyond the things that are in our face. I see this every day at work, where you have panels that perhaps don't have a person of color on it, right? And nobody sees anything wrong with that. right? However, we say that we're going to have a race and social justice initiative. So, you know, from my point of view, we most certainly need to address systemic racism, and we won't be able to change people's hearts, but we most certainly will be able to change the rules. And over time, that will allow us to be able to change hearts through action. And so until we do that, I think our communities will continue to be left behind. The impact of our intentions will not be felt. We will have, you know, and we need to work towards that. I say that all the time. Our communities are tired of taking the loss. And these losses are all based in the fact that people don't see value in people of color. There's a lot of people out there that just don't value us. And that is the root of what we need to do and what we need to change. And we cannot move forward as a country. COVID, we're going to get a vaccine soon, right? And then everybody will go back to normal, and we will continue to be underrepresented in the workplace. We will continue to be evicted more than anyone else, right? We have to draw the line here now and be anti-racist in everything we do.
Thank you very much. And that provides the perfect segue for the last question before we get into your respective summary statements. So thank you for that. So the last question is racism, is that a permanent feature of the American political and social landscape, or for the economic landscape, you know, for that matter? Is this something that has a sort of permanence with which we're going to continue to have to live indefinitely, or do you guys see an end? Do you guys see an end of the rainbow, or do you guys see the light at the end of the tunnel? And please don't say it's a train coming. Just let's go with this metaphor for right now. Okay. So what do you guys think? Is this something that we're going to have to continue to live with? Or is this something that you guys can see in the foreseeable future that will, if not completely go away, will at least be mitigated? So let's begin with Sharon on this one.
Well, thank you. As you know, it was observed before I think our country was actually a nation by Alexis de Tocqueville that the challenge of America is the challenge of the color line. There is nothing that has changed over these several hundred years about that being the challenge. And this is more than just finding white allies. This has to be about white people stepping back and allowing Black and other people of color to lead on the solutions. And I do want to riff a little bit on what Chukundi was saying, because I do believe that we have to start with Black Lives Matter. I'm going to just share a little story real quick. So one of my aunties, who's probably now in her 90s, had really been puzzled a couple of years ago and said, I don't understand why it has to be Black Lives Matter. Why isn't it that all lives matter? And, you know, I give her a little grace because of her age. Her generation is a little different. And I remember feeling initially very challenged by calling myself a person of color when that phrase came around. But the point is that the response is that, and I think, I can't remember his name, so never mind, it's not important. The response is that Black people's lives have not mattered to so many people for so many years that if we don't start with Black Lives Matter, it really doesn't matter about other people, because we, as African Americans and Black people go, so too does every other underrepresented group. And so for me, I will conclude by saying, is it a permanent feature? It is something that we will always struggle with it. This is part of our DNA as a country. But I do believe, and the reason that I'm running for state representative is because I believe that government and laws are the ways that we mitigate and compensate for this terrible, I don't know, I'm not a science person, but whatever is in a DNA, those little elements, that piece that is that racist strand in our country's DNA can only be fought against, I think, by making sure that we have the right policies and the right practices in place that lift up those communities that are otherwise oppressed both by history and by current laws.
Thank you, Sharon. So let's go with Chukundi, and then Kirsten, and then we'll end with John, and then we'll start on your summary statements. Chukundi?
Yeah, this is obviously it's an interesting question. It's a takeoff what I just got through talking about. And the fact is that, I do see a day where we will have true change, right? But honestly, to tell the truth, I think it's a generation away. Like Kirsten said, I hope it happens in my lifetime, but we have to start now. We have to start giving people the resources that they need now to be able to, and then a generation from now, those people will be 18 years old and have what they need and would have been raised in a society that, that provided for them. And so in the interim, we have to rely on policy changes to the contract, right? We have to hold people accountable on paper, right? Because that's what's happening. And as we go through, and I just know this because, like I said, I work in a large institution, the city of Seattle, and I have many coworkers that say, well, why do I have to go to this training? Well, why do we have to do this, right? And that I don't have time to answer that for every coworker that says that, right? It's because we said so, because this is the policy now, and hopefully their kids, right? The people that come in behind them will one day realize that, hey, this is a great thing to do, right? But for right now, we have to say that this is in fact the policy. We need everybody to come to this training and understand how we need to move forward, right? Whether you want to or not, because it's the policy. And so, yeah, I do think that there's light at the end of the tunnel. The train's not coming through, to kind of go with your analogy, but it's most certainly a few years from now. And I hope that I see it in my lifetime, but most certainly my kids will.
Thank you. Kirsten, and then John.
It's a sobering question because of the legacy of how this country was built. To have the boldness of a revolution that brought democracy and said that all men are created equal, while simultaneously executing the genocide of indigenous people who were here and forcing others to be property and work the land to build this country simultaneously, is the greatest contradiction that any of us have ever known. I remember once hearing, John Punch, the first case in Virginia that cemented that Blackness would be the characteristic of unrelenting slavery, right? We weren't even a country yet. We weren't a ratified country yet when that case happened. And I remember once hearing a friend say, racists didn't create racism. Racism created racists. And if that is true, and I believe it's true, that was a policy that then created the circumstances, that created a system that then needed people to steward those laws, created a system that had to then create the container of what was being built here. And if humans created it, that means we can uncreate it. That means we can build something new. And I'm an activist, I'm an abolitionist. I believe wholeheartedly what we have made, we can make better, that we can heal and make amends, that we can have a do-over. And I just want to say, the legacy of what whiteness has done to steward, whiteness, a made up category, right? It's not real, it's all made up. And anything that's made up, we can revision into what is actually real. And what's real is real, tangible people every day standing shoulder to shoulder and fighting together. So I absolutely believe it's possible. I've seen us chip away at it generation after generation. I've seen it accelerating in this timeline. I had no idea when COVID started that Black Lives Matter would finally get the attention it deserves in this moment of pause. It is exhilarating to know that that level of clarity for folks is possible. And we just have to keep the work moving forward and do it collaboratively and name the thing for what it is so that we can take it apart and build the new thing that we deserve.
Thank you, Kirsten. And John.
Yeah, and I want to build off of Kirsten's very important point that at the founding of the United States was this inherent contradiction between this notion of equality and this practice of discrimination, slavery, oppression of indigenous peoples, etc. And just go a little bit further with that and say that that same contradiction just keeps cycling through American history, oftentimes in a progress and then backlash against the progress sort of model or paradigm. So we have the Civil War, obviously a move in favor of more equality, but then a butchered Reconstruction and Jim Crow laws. We have the Civil Rights era, but then that's followed by the Nixon strategy to try to sort of, in effect, punish Southern Democrats for being so progressive on, racial progress and the advent of the era of mass incarceration. And finally, perhaps most poignantly, we have Obama and then we have Trump. I mean, that's just inconceivable. So there is this interplay and progress, step forward, step back dimension to U.S. history that's, been in play for several hundred years. So with that basis, I'll say this. Do I think that racism will also always be to some extent an issue? I'm going to have to say yes. But more importantly, I'm going to say that I do believe progress over time tends to work against it, and that surely, steadily, surely, with some ups and downs, we're going to move to much more progressive, a much more progressive future in that realm. And I'll cite, a couple things. I've talked about the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, the 2020 Bostock decision that extended higher employment protections to the LGBTQ community. All of these bespeak of movements towards equality. And we've had a Black president, we have a Black vice presidential candidate, we've had a chairman of the Joint Chiefs that's Black, Secretary of State that's Black, corporate leaders, education leaders, so there's lots of progress. The challenge, of course, is making that deeper so that we address inequalities, inequities between the races, not just, at a high level, although they exist there, but in the widespread level where the bulk of the population resides. But I am optimistic about the longer term future.
Okay, thank you, John. So now, because of time constraints, we need to cut your summary statements from 2 minutes to 1 minute. That's not me, that's, I'm just taking orders. I just take orders around here. So what we'll do is just in order to make things easier on me, if you guys don't mind, I'm just going to go in the order that I see you on my screen. So from top to bottom. So I'm going to begin with John, and then we're going to go with Chukundi, and then we're going to go with Sharon, and then we're going to go with Kirsten. I hope everybody's okay with that. So take it away, John.
Okay, well, I'll first just say I've welcomed the chance to be here tonight. I very much appreciate the substantive nature of the questions and the dialogue, so thank you very much. We face multiple concurrent crises: the pandemic, the economic recession, the budget crisis that's pending in Olympia, the crisis of racial justice and climate change, all concurrent. And it's imperative that we take the appropriate approach to these crises. They're not short-term things that need Band-Aid solutions. Instead, they represent an opportunity that if we embrace them, they provide opportunities to really restructure society. And we should pursue them in that light, as difficult as it may be. The theme of my campaign, consistent with that, is bold structural change, not just incremental reforms. You've heard my priorities: avoiding austerity, new progressive taxation, address the demands for racial justice by dealing with underlying inequalities, and dealing with the threat of climate change. Those are all restructuring policy proposals. I'm an informed, substantive, highly involved candidate. I do ask for your support. You can find out more about me, staffordforstaterepresentative.org. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I will say, I just feel so bad. I haven't been really consistent with your name.
Chukundi.
Chukundi. Okay, Chukundi, I'm sorry. I just sent you a private.
Kirsten, I know you feel good.
Oh, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name as well, Kirsten. Anyway, okay, Mr. Salisbury.
Thank you. Yeah, you know what? I would just remind people that, I am a 23-year city employee. I'm a labor union. I've been a union member for 23 years, 25 years actually, 4 different unions. I'm a father, I'm a parent, I'm a homeowner, and I'm really running to represent the 37th district in a way that it hasn't been represented before. We've had many, many years of progressive leadership with well-intended representatives. However, Black and brown people and people that look like me in this community have continued to take the loss. So why is that? What we need now is a new voice for the new normal that will really drill down and let us get the impact, the impact that we intend to truly meet that, right? Our intentions really mean well. There's many policies and we could go into all of them, right? But as you look around in this community, you see an erasure, you see gentrification. And why is that? I don't look or sound like any politician you've seen in a long time. And there's a reason for that. So visit me at chukundi.com and learn more about what I have planned, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Chukundi. Sharon.
Thank you. First of all, I do want to say thank you, Chris, as well as Erica and Amy, and the NAACP of Seattle King County for organizing this. I've really appreciated this opportunity to spend time with you and to answer your questions. These questions really are very provocative, and I hope the audience finds that our responses have been collectively informative and interesting to all of you. I'm proud to represent the 37th Legislative District because, frankly, I am proud to represent you. I'm proud to represent our communities. I have worked with all of you through the years to ensure that we have equity in education, to ensure that we have opportunities for workers and our small business, and to ensure that we have justice for all. I am the only candidate in this race who authentically and deeply knows the histories of our 37th Legislative District communities, and I hope that you will support me as I continue to work forward together with you to realize our visions by raising our voices.
Thank you, Sharon. And is it Kirsten or Kirsten?
It's Kirsten. Yeah,
I got it right. All right.
you did. You did.
All right, Kirsten. So
Thank
last
you
to the
so
party, last to send us off. So please go ahead.
And I just want to say thank you so much, NAACP, again, for creating these spaces. You all always make sure that our community has access to the most important information. I have deep appreciation. I'm running for state rep position 2 because my neighbors asked me to. And they asked me to because we need someone who's going to stand up for our progressive values. We did not know when this campaign began that we were going to have the backdrop of a global pandemic and the reckoning of what that has done to our economy, as well as Black Lives Matter finally having the attention it deserves, and so much community work locally finally having the momentum it needs. I'm a Black LGBTQ woman. I'm a PTA mom. I've been in Rainier Valley since 2004 and in Seattle since '99. And me and my husband are proud to raise our children here. And I have, through my work over 20 years, built so much amazing policy. And I'm so excited about what it is, the possibility of working with you, my neighbors, to cement more change. We're going to have to hold the line on the budget. We're going to have to make sure we continue to invest in our communities. And I want you to join us at Elect KHT and our community campaign so that we can build what good governance on the other side of this is going to look like. So thank you again.
So this real quick closing statement. Thank you all so much for participating in this candidate forum. And I just have to say, I kind of got roped into this, but I'm glad I did because I learned so much from all you guys, right? I am completely blown away by the quality of you as candidates. And I'm a political scientist, right? I teach this stuff. Completely blown away by you guys. So I wish you all the best of luck. So, and you guys have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
All right. Bye, you guys.